Well, cool. Well, hello everybody. My name is Kevin Mason. I'm the fire preparedness coordinator at Ventura County RCD, and I run the Ventura County PBA. Um, the VCRCD has been hosting webinars on fire ecology and wildfire and fire safety, with a really big emphasis on how we can create more, like make more fire safe communities. And in order to um, plan for like a more fire safe future, I think we need to like better understand the history of fire safety locally here in Ventura County, but also across California. And so that includes having a better understanding of the indigenous landscape. And here in Ventura County, the Chumash and Tataviam are the native people of Ventura County. And the tribal governments consist of the Barbareño and Ventureño Band of Mission Indians, also known as BVBMI. And the Chumash span most of the county. And then also the Tataviam land is also in eastern Ventura County. And the tribal government among the Tataviam is the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. And both tribes conducted cultural burning on an annual basis until the mission system criminalized those practices on May 31st, 1793. But those practices are a huge part of the landscape, and we are also in Ventura County, we're beginning to implement prescribed burning more onto the land. And in order to do that in like a really safe and responsible way, we really want to better understand how to do it in a way so that we're helping native plants and animals and not hurting them. And so many of our webinars have included speakers from across California, but also locally. And so I'm really grateful. And it's my privilege to introduce Ron Goode, who is the tribal chair of um, the North Fork Mono tribe, um, who are indigenous peoples of part of the central and southern Sierra Nevada, and also Christina Oraftik. Thank you guys so much for joining today, and really grateful to you both for taking time out of your busy schedules to be speaking on. Their title is the essence of cultural burning on revitalization of culture, wildlife, and landscape.
I'll let Christina say hi.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so just to add some context here, um, I've been working with Ron and the North Fork Mono Tribe for about 8 years as a consultant, not a tribal member, but I have been helping a lot the cultural burning program. We've also done some research across the state on how tribes are burning, what they need to do more cultural burning. And we've produced as well a kind of process guide to help other tribes who want to rekindle their relationship with fire when that relationship has been dormant for a long time, a step-by-step guide to begin doing that. So I've been very grateful for this work, and I'll pass it back to Ron here.
Well, thank you. I was trying to put my sweatshirt on because it's getting pretty chilly for some reason. It hasn't really warmed up all day. But anyway, can you everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How many do you think you have on the call? I don't see no numbers here.
I think there are 15 people total right now.
All right. So Yeah, I mean that was a good title. So I'm Ron Goode, the tribal chairman of the North Fork Mono Tribe, and our our tribal landscape is our homeland is about 1.2 million acres, covers all of eastern Madera County, a little portion of Mariposa, a portion of Fresno, a portion of Mono and Inyo counties, and then Yosemite, a little bit of Yosemite National Park, the Devil's Postpile Monument, and Inyo National Forest, and a large portion of Sierra National Forest. So that's kind of the extent. We, as Mono Indians, go down from North Fork down into Madera, Fresno, and Tulare County. And so it's a pretty good little stretch of the foothills and mountains, the western mountain range. Okay, with that said, one of the things that we have been doing for about 30 years is putting fire back on the land, um, and having to navigate through agency jurisdictions. And so, with whomever thinks they're in charge of something, meaning like whether we're talking about the state of Calfire or Forest Service or national parks. And the reality is that there's really no quantified permit that says cultural burning is something that is allowable. And so just about in meetings constantly, and I was just in a tribal forum on Tuesday. I mean, and we spoke about cultural burning for about an hour, and there seemed to be a whole lot of discrepancy amongst federally recognized tribes, state recognized tribes, forest agencies who are trying to basically decipher, what they can allow and what they're authorized to allow. And the reason why I'm stumbling with all that is that USDA, who covers U.S. Forest Service, does not have a cultural burn policy. They have prescribed fire policies, wildfire contingencies, but nothing for cultural burning. And the only recognition of tribes is federally recognized tribes that have fire departments or fire resource departments. And so that doesn't cover anything outside of tribal lands or land-based tribes lands. And so, so therefore we don't have any coverage. And so the, major discussion is like the forest supervisor has no real authority from on the top side of what they can authorize. So therefore they move pretty gingerly. And on the other hand, what we decided, and a couple of years ago, I wrote a policy for USDA, but they just basically put it in the round file. And on the other hand, to get back, before I get back to the forest real quick, the DOI, Department of Interior, who covers parks and BLM and BIA and federal fish and wildlife, they now have a handbook covering indigenous knowledge and includes cultural burning and a video for training for all of their people on cultural burning. Department of Defense, Christina and I had a contract for a couple of years. And so we worked through them, um, creating some different aspects of working with other tribes throughout the state, and all the different aspects of what we do, so they have a better, stronger knowledge. But they do have some verbiage in some of their, um, I don't know if should call it policies or per se, but in some of their documents that, you know, is allowing cultural burning, and that was their intent at when we first started working with them. So that's the two major organizations, but the third one being USDA has nothing. And I keep pretty close contact with the Ag Secretary, and they talk a lot about resilience, but at the same time, they never mention tribes, and they don't, of course, mention anything about cultural burning. It's a lot about prescribed fire or wildfire. You know, wildfire is what is the trigger that does everything for everybody. So, you know, but not really fully understanding what resilience is about. And so that's where we're trying to work from the bottom up and kind of secure that terminology, that what is resilience, and how do we build that by showing what we do. And so in our small work that we do, you know, on different land bases, is creating a defensible space for resilience. And that defensible space is what then we look at and describe what cultural burning is about, in that it revitalizes the landscape, revitalizes the resources, you know, and regenerates water. So, with this aspect of what we're doing to freshen the landscape, because if a plant, a shrub, or tree is dying, or has dead limbs, or uh, you know, is in not a restored shape, then when a wildfire comes, it ignites fairly easy. As a matter of fact, if it's real dry, it calls fire. And so by going through and doing cultural burning, you're restoring the landscape. Cultural burning wants and expects a return. We expect an immediate return, like 1 month to 2 months. And so when and in that return, it's going to stay sparse but refreshed. So the leaves are leaves can hold water. The stalks can hold water. The root system holds water, and therefore the water table rises when we've done burning, because everything's pulling the water and holding the water higher, at a higher level, instead of it running off, running down drainages, or running off the landscape, removing the topsoil. You know, in this case, this is what we're doing when we say we're restoring and revitalizing the landscape and the resources. And so, in essence, that's what the process of cultural burning is about. But then you start to get a little more looking at the two aspects of the word. So, culture is what we look at both from tribal and practitioner view. because we're trying to restore the resources. That might be the oak tree that's going to produce acorn, or a berry bush, you know, or medicine plants, um, or resource plants like soap root, or sedge root, or redbud, three-leaf sumac. These types of or tule, or juncus, depends on where you're at, since you guys are down south. So this is what the restoration is going to do, and gives you a whole new fresh crop, which means then that when a wildfire does come, it's going to burn a whole lot slower. It may burn, it more likely will burn. It's just not going to be going, 4 or 5 miles a night. It's gonna hit a spot and then slow down, and may still be burning in that same spot the next morning, which then allows firefighters to have some sense of control, you know, and then they can catch it. And that's what we call defensible space, and then really creating a resilience to wildfire. I mean, that's what I see USDA and all agencies, what they're referring to when they say resilience. Resilience from what, and so um, now coming to the fire itself, then that's a whole different aspect of fire, um, between uh, fire that is prescribed or controlled, and then of course wildfire. But what a lot of folks don't understand is that uh, wildfire, for a large percentage of your wildfire, is controlled, you know. So we just had the Garnet fire, and I forgot how many, 80,000 acres or whatever it burned, you know. But there was a good segment of it that was being allowed to burn because they knew they can control the border of it. And that same thing happened with the Creek fire. It burned 378,000, but the tribal firefighters that were on the project told and knew that they could put the fire out at 278, but they were told to let it go ahead and burn, and they could go home. And so basically, it burned for another 100,000. And so, but that aspect of controlled wildfire is not really discussed or talked about, because they really don't want folks to know that's what they're doing, you know. And I say that because agencies with their prescribed fire, like the Sierra National Forest, is saying they want 40 to 50,000 acres burned. And they're lucky to get 1,000 acres burned every 2 or 3 years. And you want 40 to 50,000? Well, when the wildfire comes along, well, okay, now, we're accomplishing part of our mission here, right? And, and I'm probably being a little blunt about the whole thing, but there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand, and they don't know what goes on with how the agencies, they could put the fire out a lot sooner than they do. But it comes back then to where we're at in terms of what is the differences between cultural fire and prescribed fire. And I've been on numerous committees. And so the biggest challenge or non-support not only comes from the agency, but also from the environmentalist, or those that claim they're environmentalists. And so what I've discovered is that environmentalists have their own agenda, what they want. And many of them don't want cultural burning simply because it's too small and doesn't accomplish what they want. And again, it goes back to they want these thousands of acres burned, right? And they're not going to get it. And they don't see what cultural burning can do, because we might burn 100 acres, 150 acres. We might only burn 3 or 4 times. I burn 8 times a year. But at the same time, as an agency, if you were burning every day, you were burning, every week, and you did this for 5 months, you can accomplish a lot. The difference between our burning is that the piles are designed to burn quickly and burn down, and then we close them up. And so whereas piles that the forest makes, they build them about twice as high, if not higher, but just their normal piles are 10 foot high. They look like teepees. They put logs on them. And our piles are more like beaver huts, 6 feet high, 6 by 10 on the ground. And all my leaders or burn leaders are instructed, you do not put any size of log or wood on there until it's burning. And then you don't put good wood on it, because we'll use good wood for a resource of some sort. But what happens when you start with a pile with logs on it is it's going to smoke and smolder a whole lot. And consequently, like we just did a burn in June up on the Sierra. And it's our first one with them. And we put 119 fires down over 4 days. Never got any complaints from North Fork, which was 10 miles below us. And nobody else knew, except that the helicopter flew over and marked it on the map that we were doing cultural burning. Now, how they knew it was called a cultural burn, I don't know, but they got it right. So when the forestry is burning, or Southern California Edison, or anybody else that's putting fire down on the ground, Calfire, you see there's smoke 10 miles, 20 miles away, or even 50 from the valley up to the foothills. You can see the big plumes coming up. Well, so our smoke doesn't have that. It filters into the trees and into the landscape. And that's why they don't know when we burn and how we burn. About 3 years ago, the forest had come to me and done a burn with us. And then they did one of their own, and they made about 20 piles. And they called me. They were in a little hole called Blue Canyon. And they called, and they said they were notifying everybody that they were going to do a burn, and that they informed me that their piles were like ours. And I said, no logs? They go, nope, no logs. I said, okay then. So why are you calling me? Because I'm not even going to see your fire, and I'm not even going to know when you burned. So you might as well just light it up and burn, because nobody's going to complain. And there's a number of folks that I've been talking to about for the last 3 years Oh, I'm not sure I know what burn you were talking about. Yeah, of course. But when they don't burn like that, everybody knows. I get calls all day long. Hey, who's burning up here in North Fork? Who's burning over there at Shaver? You know, who's burning over here? And it's like, yeah, well, okay, immediately. And so that's the biggest difference between cultural burning and prescribed fire is how you build the piles, uh, how you're going to burn, you know. So, and that's such a major point because the air board, the people that have bad health, uh, they're the ones that are going to be calling immediately. And so, when if our fires, we burn 4 days over at Mariposa, um, the neighbors get a little smoke, but not the town. And the town's only 5 miles away, and nobody else in the valley even knew that we burned. So again, that's a really important part of what you're going to be doing. When you're putting fire down. From our standpoint. Now, reversing that action just a little bit in terms of the indigenous aspect of when we burned on the land, when we lived on the land. Now, you may have seen smoke then because they were burning larger acreage. Could have been 400 or 500 acres at a time. But again, there's no real footprint because they had been burning for, well, centuries. I was going to say decades, but centuries. And so all they're doing is restoring the landscape so that they could keep it open. And the other part of it is what we call the see-through concept and raising the canopy. So that's one of the first things when I sit down with Forrest and they're going to tell me about this burn, I can't see 100 yards. I can't see through your trees because I got dead limbs and I got limbs hanging down to the ground, whether they're oaks or whatever they are. And so how are you going to be burning underneath all of that, And they do, and sometimes it don't work either. you know. And so even with a prescribed fire, because I've seen many of them, you'll have a low severity, you'll have moderate severity, and you'll have high severity. They don't want to talk about the high severity that got away from them. They don't even like to talk about the moderate severity because it's supposed to stay low. But if you don't prep and you don't raise the canopy and you don't have the see-through concept, why are you lighting a fire, right? What are you doing? And they just don't want to take that time. I drilled that into Calfire. They have a segment now that they're burning. I think it's about 16 miles. Was 8 or 10. Now they've expanded it. But through the trees, through the oaks and the pines, at first they didn't prep and raise the canopy. And so they lost about 87, 90 trees. And it was like, oh, okay, oh well, But that's always been their concept. Oh well. It's like, what do you mean, oh well? You're not supposed to be losing anything, And so you need to take the time to do that. Well, then they finally started. I think the last burn they did, and this has been like 5 or 6 years in a row. So the last one, they only lost 3 trees, but scorched about 37. I said, hey, you're doing better. At least it used to be you lost 37. Now you're only scorching them, which again, because they won't go in and weed eat around the trees, or hoe out about 5 feet or whatever. They don't want to take that time. And so, if you're not going to take that kind of time to do that, well, then this is the result that you're going to get, is the scorching. And so anyway, that's what we're always looking at, is trying to explain to people the differences of what we're doing. And again, it has taken a long time for the agencies to have any sort of confidence of what we do. And we still have that problem. I've pushed that envelope in my area very well. But when I work with tribes outside, including federally recognized tribes, they still have that trouble right off the top, that, oh no, and I hear federally recognized tribes say, oh, well, we're federally recognized, so we don't work with Calfire. And it's like, yeah, tell me another story, because, Calfire will shut you down. So, that part don't work. You may not have to go get their permits. That's fine. But you're still going to be working with them in one way or the other. And so, that's kind of what my discussion here, in terms of, then there's a lot of other little stuff that is differences that, we bring Calfire on, we bring Forest Service, we bring national parks and state parks to come and burn with us, come and learn what we do. So one of the biggest aspects when we're burning, let's say, a pile, is that we rake into the fire. And so we'll start out, a foot and a half or two outside of the fire, raking into the coal, to the fire or the coals, ash. And then when we finalize, and we're going to what we call a nutrient, we mix the ash and soil. And so when it finally burns down, we reach another foot or two out beyond the burn. So now we're about 3 feet out, and we rake all of that in, that topsoil, to mix in with the ash. And so basically what we have is a buffer of over 3 feet around the fire. But then as we mix the ash, we pull it in tighter, and then we'll make a nutrient out of it, and then mix it back out. So when you get done with your pile, it should be brown and shouldn't look like it burned. You shouldn't look like you just had a fire. But a lot of the forest agencies have not gotten to that aspect yet. They're still leaving their ash, and so what happens is that ash don't go away. A little short story, but we were on a project where we were working with meadows, and somebody within the committee said, "Oh, way back in 1950, we put in weirs on this meadow, and we did a couple of burns right next to it." So one of the forestry folks went out and on the meadow and checked to see, if the weir stood up and how it was doing, and it was fine. It filled up with silt, and the level of the drainage was up at top and wasn't sunken. And then they came back and they said, "Oh, by the way, your ash was still there from where the 2 burns that you did." And this was like 70 years later, so it didn't go nowhere. Yeah. So, it's just, that's why what we do is we're in the business of restoring, regenerating. And again, you're not going to get new growth if you leave the ash, because, and uh, I've been asking college folks for quite some time now. I said, you guys all need to do a study on ash, because, I've been in volcanic ash, which was, I don't know, thousands of years ago, you know, and it was warm down the bottom. And I've been into some piles that we intentionally left for animals to roll in and play in, and they're warm down the bottom. So is this ash still cooking? Is that what it's doing? And and when it does, that means that the root system is not going to be restored. It's not going to come back. So that's the point, that when we're talking about restoration and we're talking about revitalization, and our expectation that our resource is going to return, because we don't destroy the root system. On the other hand, when with prescribed fire and there are hot burns or there are hot piles, they burn so hot that the root system is burned out, and then you have nothing. You have no return. But that's also one of the points that I drive home, is when they do a prescribed fire, they don't want the underbrush to return. All they want is to have their trees. And, but what feeds the trees? The underbrush and the plants, they're all part of the system. And so if you don't want it back, well, then how's your tree going to grow? And, how are you going to really make a good economic endeavor out of your trees if you're not feeding it? I mean, you can look at your own kids that you're growing, and if you don't feed them, they're all tall and skinny, or or lanky, however you want to put it. But they're not fat, because you're not feeding them. It's the same thing with the trees. They're not going to grow either if you don't feed them. And so I don't know. That's part of the concept of environment that I keep trying to teach to them and say, that, hey, I don't know if you guys understand the actual process, or who's teaching you and what college you're going to. That's why when I'm doing the cultural burnings, I invite the professors. I got Stanford professors, Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Berkeley, Davis. I have those professors out with us, and so they know what cultural burning is about, and that's what they're going to teach. So that's the important part too, because we got so many young people learning about environmental processes and environmental science, but where's the teacher coming from? Have they been out there? Are they doing these things, or is this just something that they're learning and passing along through hearsay or book? Makes a big difference. How are we doing on time?
We're doing good. It's 6:45 right now.
Would you like to have any questions or comments, or maybe something I haven't touched on?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you so much, Ron, for sharing everything. Yeah. I think I have one question. Are there certain plants that you don't build piles over sometimes when you make piles?
Well, that's a great question. Um, you need to know what plants will be restored with fire and how
Hmm.
hot some plants have to have, right?
Hmm.
So, for instance, pine has to have a pretty hot fire to crack the seeds. And pines, even after a wildfire, do not come back for 3 to 5 years before you see the regrowth. And this is actually one of the reasons that I resist and push back against um, reforestation. Before every wildfire is done, Washington D.C. has money for reforestation. It's like, hey, one, the fire is not over. Two, you haven't done any cleanup, and three, here you are ready to go to replant. You know, and how about
Yeah.
waiting for the natural plants to come back? And it takes 3 to 5 years for the pines to start showing up. They might show up in 3 years at about a foot to 2 feet, and then after 5 years, they might be 3 or 4 feet tall, and then now you can see them.
Hmm.
And so that's how long it takes. On the other hand, immediately you're going to get black oak, willow, um, other plants start coming back. And another thing that happens immediately is your ravines where water is. So you can look down the waterway, no matter how wide the water is, your aquatic ecozone on each side might be 2 to 3 feet. So you might have a 6 foot aquatic ecozone, right? But shortly after a fire, that's going to grow 8, 10 feet. You're going to be about 5, 6 feet on each side. And you'll have this big green belt. So when you're here you have smoking trees and the wildfire is still not totally out. And you could be driving around and looking at the stream beds and the drainages, and they're a big green belt. You're like, whoa, man! They're loving it. Why? Because the water come back, and the water has risen, and so now the water's closer. Now all the plants that were there, plus they got smoked in a sense, with the fire, and the fire may not have been real hot there, and so you have just enough. On a wildfire where it's a low severity, which is usually the outside of the fire,
Mm.
the edges. When you're driving around, I have literally seen blackened trees with fresh sprouts coming up within 2 or 3 weeks. Little green sprouts popping up out of the root system, even though the tree itself is black and dead or dying.
Mm.
You know, but not the root system. And so, oh, new sprouts coming out already.
That's awesome.
So yeah, but again, but that's the same expectation we have when we're putting fire down. And so, but to answer your question is to know what can take fire. And so, I had the one time I had this we have coffee berry, and I seen some of my coffee berry get scorched, and it took a long time for them to return. Whereas most scorched trees, pine or oak, will return within the year. And but the coffee berry, pretty slow returning if it returns at all. Anyway, one day I burned the coffee berry. I said, well, all the other plants I burned, they pop right back up. The elderberries and everything else, look pretty good. But oh no, about 7-8 years ago, he never come back. So I said, okay, he didn't like fire. you know. So I mean, something I learned, but again, there are plants that can't handle that. Another one is soaproot or deer grass. There's a way to burn deer grass, and if you just go through and burn them, they may not return.
Mm.
So you can't just go ahead and light them up. And I had also where the Forest Service said they would do a cultural burn, but this was early on, and I wasn't there. So one of my other people was, but they put torches on them in the middle where the stalks are, the stalk that we use for baskets. And it's the outside leaves that dry and die, and that's what you want to burn. But they burned the inside, and so therefore the plant never came back. So,
Dang.
yeah. So there are plants that cannot take that any kind of fire like that. You have to. There's a way to burn around them and then allow them to come back, or you can even cut the stalks and then burn the leaf grass around the outside, and then you're okay. Then it'll pop back real good. So the various techniques that our people, I'm sure, all knew years ago, but things that we're having to rediscover ourselves on how to burn, what to burn, which way to burn it.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting about the deer grass and the coffee berry. Those plants also grow down here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ron, I think someone asked a question in the chat from Matt Salmasian. He put, "Hey Ron, how closely do you work with Dirk Charlie of the Dunlop Band? Just talked to him today at Reforestation Conference in Roseville."
Dirk's my buddy. We do a lot of work with each other, and so yeah,
Cool.
good man.
Awesome.
I
Does
think
any, yeah,
well, if somebody wants to ask a question,
yeah,
but
does anybody have any questions?
in
Yeah, feel
terms
free
of
to unmute or put yourself in the chat. Can people unmute, Mary, if they have questions?
Yeah, they should be able to.
Okay, cool.
so one of the things again on culture, restoring the culture when we're burning, we have one area called in Mariposa. It's about 400 acres we're working on, and it's primarily three-leaf sumac, which is also known as sourberry, and the stalk is used for our baskets. And so in 2010, we had 2 basket makers. We had more basket makers than that, but that's all that would come together. And they gathered over 5 acres. They got several hundred sticks trying to make one basket. They weren't sure if they were going to have 150 good stalks to work with. But in 2020, 2023, we had 30 basket makers. In all of them, we have pictures of armloads. And matter of fact, 3 of my basket makers were just out there after our last burn in November and showing me big armloads of sticks, and they sat in one spot,
Awesome.
One of the tribes from Cold Springs came over, and the elder ladies just parked their truck, and that's where they sat all day. And I kept trying to tell them that they go to this spot and go to that spot, and they just smiled at me and kept cleaning their sticks, you know. And so that big difference now of when of our restoration work and access is really important, you know. And on this piece of property, our roads go pretty much everywhere that we want them to go. And so the elders can drive around, and they can drive right up to the resource, and you know, set up camp and gather all they want and sit down and clean sticks, tell stories, sing songs, you know. And that's all part of the restoration of culture. So that's when we say cultural burning, that's what we're looking at.
That's awesome. That's a beautiful story. That's so cool to hear. I've also heard of how when hazelnut burns, that like so much of the basketry material is like so much better. Yeah, that's really cool. I think another person
Hey, I have a
asked another
question.
question. Oh yeah.
If I
Yeah.
may, just
Oh, please do. Yeah.
interject. Thank you, Kevin. Hi, Chairman Goode. I hope you can see me. I got to meet you
Yeah.
a few years ago with Jeanette Acosta on a burn that you were teaching some young folks, and it was really a wonderful experience. I'm down in San Luis Obispo. A question I had for you, maybe less of a question and more of a request that you talk a little bit more, is that from what I've seen as a white person who's educated in the, scientific way of burning in California, the older I get, the more I can tell the inextricable link between the health of the land and the health of the people. And not to bring up politics, but in these kind of hectic times, it just seems like we need all of the healing that we can get, and that there is a reciprocity between the land and the people that I know, and I know that we are lacking now. And I hope that we can find a bridge for more land management this way. And I wondered if you had any comments about healing the land and healing the people.
I believe that you already said it. So I'll reiterate that one part that I didn't talk about in this talk was the communal aspect. And that many of our people, when we call them trainings, but our burns, a lot of folks come there individually. They're invited, of course, but when they leave, they leave as a community, and they leave with this sense of feeling that not only did they do something for the landscape, but the landscape did something for them. And they came maybe leery, scared of fire, and now they feel, close to fire, to understanding fire. And so that's an important part of what we're doing, that I don't always reiterate on that or talk about it so much. Is it's something, the healing aspect. One of the things that as you hit it right now with our politics that are going on, and I alluded to that when I talked about the resilience from USDA, is that I tell all of our people, one of the reasons, and we're not just here to restore the landscape. We're not just here to restore culture. We're also here to heal And in all of our cultural burns, we have ceremony. We start with ceremony. We start with song. We start with prayer. And the whole point being is that um, the land has to be healed as well. And we have to be healed. And there's a lot of people, believe me, I hear you. There's a lot of people who are coming and just don't know. They tell me they're losing sleep because they don't know how this and where this government is going. And I've said over and over, don't worry about it. Because community is what keeps us strong. Down here, where we all are at, is what's going to keep us going. Yes, we can lose a lot of sleep, if that's all we're concerned about. And yes, there is things that we need to be concerned about from our jobs and work, and I was affected because money was became non-existent, and my tribe worked May and June and a portion of July, but we're supposed to be working July, August, September, October, November, and we no longer had any money, because the money got cut off, the money got shut down, and those were our prime months to work. So families got hurt because I have 34 people employed, and they're feeling it. Yes, and so are we. So it does affect us, but again, we have to keep going. We can't just. It's a part of our resistance and our resilience as people. So you got to kind of look back and say, well, how we existed as people. We went through what history was all about. History was pretty rough on all of us. I don't care if you're Indian or non-Indian or, white, black, yellow, pink, whatever color you are. We all face dire times. So how do you resist that? How do you keep going? Because you build a relationship and you work on that relationship. And so for me, as a tribe, that's one of the first things that I teach with other tribes is you want to do a cultural burn? And they're always going, well, we don't know where to get people. I'm like, oh my gosh, don't you have universities? Don't you have colleges? Don't you have organizations? Everybody wants to do something to help. They're willing to help. They'll do it for free. Me, I at least feed them and, give them a place to go to the restroom and place to put their tent. And I can't maybe do much more than that, but I can do that much, right? And for many people, that is like perfect. What do you mean I could go camp free and do a little work on the land and, get a little dirt under my fingernails? So that's you brought up a great point. That's why I say when they leave as in communal. They tell me they go. I get people writing to me all the time. They tell me they go home singing, talking all the way home, 4 or 5 hour trip, nonstop talking. They didn't sleep. They've been there for 3-4 days, and they're tired, and yet they're all jazzed up and fired up and ready to come back again. So I don't know, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marika, for bringing that up and saying that and asking. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thank you so much. Does anyone else have any other questions that they
Not a question, just a comment. But first, Haku, thank you for meeting with us. I'm Chumash, and we got to do the first cultural burn in over 250 years at the University of Santa Barbara, which was really special because it was first outlawed for all of California at the Santa Barbara Presidio. And the one thing we did fight with Santa Barbara County Fire was that we wanted to start the fire with a traditional fire drill and not have all of the gear on. And it was a big fight, but they ended up letting us start it that way, which was really nice. And a while ago, I went to a seminar with somebody who was California Indian, and they participate in the fires with the karuk. And I know that after they burn, they do rake the ash into the soil to promote oxygenated soil.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. And you know, I work with a lot of these people. So I'm not saying that I taught them, but they know exactly what we've been doing. And yeah, and there's a number of tribes that we're trying to get off the ground, even with the Chumash, to get more fire on the ground. And we're willing to come down too and support you and help you. Likewise, our next burn is going to be February 13 to 16, President's Weekend, and you're welcome to get a hold of us. My colleague Christina Oraftik her email may be on here, and she'll be doing the registration. You know, so bring a team up. Come on up. Bring song with you. Come sing. Come join us, and you know, so. And definitely don't be afraid to invite us to come down to be with you. Because my feeling is that we have 200 tribes in the state of California, and everybody should be burning. You know? That's my vision.
Thank you so much, Ron. It's been such a pleasure and such a privilege. Yeah, so grateful to you again for taking time to talk with us today. And yeah,
That's been a pretty fast hour.
yeah, it's been a joy, like listening and learning. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Ron.
All right.
Rocky
Have a great
nice.
day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone. Thank you.